Hi. Hi. Welcome to this daily astrology chat that I record live each day. Today is January 15th, 2025. But the things we're going to talk about today are really active throughout January and February of 2025. Continuing to talk about Mars retrograde in Cancer. Let me get this highlighted on the map for us. Um, Good morning. I hope everyone is doing well. How are we feeling with that Cancer full moon behind us and this Mars retrograde in Cancer? Uh, the feel of that Cancer full moon is really active for the next couple of weeks until we have the next lunation. So everything that we've been talking about with that is really still going on as well. Okay, so here we have our Mars retrograde in Cancer, circled on a chart that I took of basically the sky right now. And so Mars will be retrograde in Cancer from January 6th through February 23rd. And Mars retrograde is something that happens every couple of years. And it's always sort of a significant time when we can reflect on an area of our life and recalibrate in an area of our life. If you know the part of the sky ruled by Cancer in your chart, based upon your rising sign, that could be really important for understanding this transit, or what planets and points you have in Cancer. But either way, some of the things we're going to talk about today are relevant whether you have that information or not. My goal is to help better understand sort of the opportunity that is available with Mars retrograde. I don't want this to sound negative with the don't. It's just that sometimes understanding what not to do really can help us understand what to do. And I also think that it's not a good idea with astrology to think about it as it telling us to do this or not do that. I don't want this to be misunderstood that way either, right? My intention is just to sort of help us better understand and work with the opportunities and the environment of Mars retrograde in Cancer, the potential of Mars retrograde in Cancer. And sometimes when we look at this isn't a good idea, or this is something that might come up during this time that you might want to avoid, that can just sort of help us to understand the positive potential of the energy a little bit better. So please don't take that the wrong way. And I would love to jump right in. Please leave any questions in the comments, or any comments in the comments in the chat, and I will take a look at that at the end, because I'm still pretty new to this, and it's hard for me to focus, and I try to keep it moving for you guys and not to, keep this interesting. I'm going to zoom in because I'm going to be using the tools here to do a little, put a little visual up for us as I talk about these different points. And I just want to allow that to be at the center of the screen. So thank you for forgiving me as always for my pace. Let's put this here in the middle of the screen. That will help us. Okay, so I have 11 things today that I want to talk about. I was working toward a list. So initially I had 15 and I tried to pare it down. So we ended up with 11 things that I think avoiding during the Mars retrograde in Cancer period could be helpful in terms of better understanding the energies. Okay. The first is, whoop, don't internalize your anger. Okay, let's see how I can make this work. That looks kind of good, right? Everyone can see that. I like that. Okay, cool. And it still makes it pretty easy for me to revise it too. Okay, now we're cooking. Now we're ready to cook. All right, don't internalize your anger. And I think that a lot of us have been working with better expressions of anger, better understandings of anger with the nodes moving, the North Node moving through Aries and the nodes moving through Libra and Aries. And so this is interesting, this coming up around this time, because I think it sort of resonates with that as well. The idea that anger is bad is incorrect. It's not. Anger is there to show us something that we are supposed to move away from, something that isn't working for us, something that isn't safe, something that isn't right for us in some way, shape, or form. And it gives us that motivation and that drive and that energy to move away from it. So there are unhealthy expressions of anger, externalizing it, right? It's not always healthy to express anger in certain ways. We have to express it in healthy ways. First, calming ourselves down and letting that anger come out, maybe through journaling, through speaking with someone who's really trusted, through some sort of physical movement, and then tapping in like internally to how we're really feeling. And then once calm, maybe discussing it with someone if it's someone you need to talk to, or taking some sort of action to further move yourself away from that challenge. For example, um, obviously unhealthy of expressions of anger we don't even have to talk about, but I think that externalized ones. But I think that the idea of internalizing our anger, the importance of not internalizing anger, can't be overstated, and I think it is often sort of underappreciated in our culture, because anger can be feared, because there are so many unhealthy expressions of anger externally. Um, it can be very easy to turn that in on yourself and start to wonder if you're the problem. If maybe you weren't nice enough, you weren't um, good enough, you didn't show up the way you were supposed to, you, whatever it is. I almost don't even want to give voice to all of those statements, right? That's internalizing anger, taking it out on yourself. And I think that sometimes there can be distortions of Mars energy when it's working retrograde. It's not really distortions, it's just that it can be sort of blocked. I guess it can be a bit distorted, the energy. Um, and so that is a little bit more likely during a time like this. So instead, working with that anger as it comes up to express it in a healthy way, and then, uh, you know, assert yourself as needed into some sort of action or activity, um, is more recommended, in my opinion. Okay, so that's our first one. Number two, what do you guys think of these? Have you been working with any of these energies lately? Feel free to let me know in the chat. I do think Mars retrograde in Cancer is strong. And then with this full moon at the same time, in some ways it sort of muted those energies for a minute, but then they came back sort of more full force. Try not to take it personally. Try not to take it personally with Mars retrograde in Cancer. Our sensitivities can be a little bit heightened with Mars retrograde, especially in Cancer. And Cancer values personal safety so much and can be very protective. So sometimes that can be a bad combination that can cause us to take things a little bit more personally than perhaps we should. Instead, thinking about how the way someone acts, the way someone shows up really says so much more about them than it does about you. Finding that pause button when you're tempted to take things personally and thinking about, is this about them or is this about me? Is this something I really need to be upset about? Or maybe is this an interaction that they should be upset about? Yes. I'm not sure that my changing the words here is really helping. Is it? Maybe it'd be better for me to just let this part go. Or maybe I can just really leave it up here so that I'm not going back and forth too much. Don't dwell on the past without purpose. It's not that thinking nostalgically isn't beneficial during this time. I think it really is. I think that Mars retrograde in Cancer absolutely lends itself to being nostalgic, to reviewing the past, through thinking things over. But there are sort of like expressions of anger. There are healthy and unhealthy ways to do this, right? And so doing it with purpose, thinking about the past with an energy of not rumination, but review and sort of thinking a little bit objectively and learning from what's happened in order to move forward, rather than sort of being stuck in an emotional moment, ruminating, being lost with any kind of regret or anything like that. Um, so I think that thinking over the past and being nostalgic, right on schedule, just like some of these more emotional things might come up within us during Mars retrograde, and it's good to pay attention to them. Same thing with being a bit nostalgic, a bit reflective, but you want to stay in that energy of objectivity and being um, proactive about it rather than beating up on yourself. A few of these things are maybe about not beating up on yourself, right? Not doing it without purpose, not just ruminating, not taking things personally, um, not internalizing that anger, making sure you express it in a healthy way. Yes. Okay. Moving forward. This one's a little bit different. Don't make impulsive decisions about your home. And you might be tempted to. Cancer rules the home, your physical home. It does also relate to family and that part of the sky that relates to um, uh, that part of the zodiac that relates to family and family of origin and parents and our roots and our mother and things like this. Um, but I think that these fires in Los Angeles, it's a little on the nose for Mars retrograde in Cancer, right? Because Cancer does rule the home. And so things about home can come to the surface. And they sort of have for all of us in some ways, even if we're not in Los Angeles. Just thinking about homes and beautiful homes. Cancer is beautiful homes and loving home, and home being a wonderful sanctuary. And Mars sort of coming in and disrupting that energy a little bit, or causing us to focus on that energy a little bit. I said in an earlier report a week ago or longer, I'm not actually sure, that it's interesting the ways in which when we're working on a theme, it doesn't mean necessarily that the things with that theme come up for us in an easy way, right? Often they come up in a really challenging way. So, like if Aries is working on, if Aries rules and is about leadership, that doesn't mean that Aries always are in leadership roles. It means in some ways that they're always struggling with themes of leadership. They're always working on that idea, on that concept, on internalizing that ideal. And so Cancer's like that when it comes to our physical homes. And Mars retrograde energy can be a bit impulsive. It can just cause actions to move in a little bit of a different way. So if you have some sort of an impulse to make a big change to your home, now is a good time, I would say, for planning, for considering, and for thinking about all of that, and then make the actual moves to move it forward, perhaps after the Mars retrograde. Or, I mean, again, I don't want to be the kind of astrology person who um, says do this and don't do that at different times. I actually think that if you just move slowly and you really consider the action a little extra rather than doing it too quickly, that's really my only note on it. Would I begin a home renovation during a Mars retrograde in Cancer? 100%. But I wouldn't do it impulsively. So, okay. We are on number 5. Number 5. Are these resonating at all? Don't overextend yourself emotionally. How do we overextend ourselves emotionally? It's easy to overextend yourself. Understand how we overextend ourselves in terms of our time, right? You can double book yourself. You can just have too much going on, not leave enough time for rest. And basically, it's the same here. And a Mars retrograde with emotions, it's the same with emotions. You can take too much on that is for others and not leaving enough time for yourself. And that can leave you drained and burn out. And I would say that especially when it's very close people during a Mars retrograde in Cancer, we might really be tempted to do that because we're feeling sort of especially close to our closest people, especially family during this time. But, boundaries can get a little bit shaky. And we can be so protective too. We can really feel for other people during this time. So don't overextend yourself too much emotionally. Remember to have those emotional boundaries the same way that you have boundaries around your time and your physical space. We just can't take too much on during this time so that you can be of the best service possible, not so that you can just make yourself happy and ignore everyone else. It's not about that. It's about the fact that you need rest too. And so giving yourself that permission to step back as needed, I think is important, especially during this time. But I mean, all the time too. All these things really kind of go for all the time, don't they? All right, this one is sort of similar. Number 6, don't just push forward. Mars retrograde energy is sort of a slowing down, and we might not feel as motivated as usual. We might not feel as energetic. We might not feel as confident. The energy is sort of going inward a little bit more. We're having more energy on the inside. I hate to use the word energy so much. I need to find another way of saying it. I'm actually bothering myself with how much I use the word energy. How do I say that? The attention, the focus is more inward than it is outward right now. And so if you try to push forward when the potential isn't there as much as it usually is, when really you're sort of not meant to be doing that right now, now is more of a reflective time to be thinking and considering and making plans for the future. If you try to push forward, then you might make progress, but it'll require so much more effort. It's sort of like knowing the best times of day for you to do things and doing your hardest things at those times of day when possible, versus, waking up in the middle of the night to work on your homework, right? That isn't your best time and it would be harder. So don't just push forward during this time just to push forward. If you need to slow just a little bit, allow for that because it might be a little bit harder to make progress. And slow intentional action is better during this time than just charging ahead with Mars retrograde in Cancer. So we are on number 7. Don't neglect self-care. It's especially needed during this time. Anything related to water is especially great with Mars retrograde in Cancer. Getting adequate rest, really nourishing and caring for your body, not just your mind, letting your body get enough rest, remembering just to kind of drop your shoulders, relax your jaw, making your body as comfortable as possible, taking a moment once in a while to just think, okay, the way I'm sitting right now, is there a way I can adjust where I could be 5% more comfortable? Just paying attention to how we feel physically during this time. That is a part of self-care, and it's an ongoing part of self-care throughout the day. But whatever self-care means to you, um, eating well, getting some exercise, Mars retrograde, any kind of physical movement is really, really good. Self-care requires a little effort, you know. It isn't the same as those numbing activities, that there's a time and place for them too. And, you know, most of us engage in those kinds of things regularly, whether it's watching TV or, you know, listening to podcasts or YouTube, and just taking it easy. Like hopefully you're doing right now. There, you know, there is a time and a place, but if we can get a little education from it, a little learning, like hopefully you are from this, if there can be a little value, then it starts to become actually self-care, I think. When it's just sort of entertainment, when it doesn't require something of us, you know, it can sort of border more on like a numbing activity. The self-care stuff requires a little more effort, getting up and going for a walk or going to the gym, um, calling a friend who you really love, who you haven't talked to in a while, who you know would be a great person to connect with about this. Getting yourself the healthy foods that you need to cook this meal that you're really, really craving, even though um, you really just want to go home and relax. You know, those little bouts of self-care are what at the end of the day really build the relationship with yourself and the trust with yourself. And now is such an opportunity for that with Mars retrograde in Cancer. Again, I don't want to be highlighting negative with this list of don'ts. It's just a tool to help us sort of understand what does work. Okay, I think I've said enough about that one. Don't let fear take over. There can be something about Mars retrograde that can be fearful. Cancer is protective, and Cancer can be a little bit fearful. It's the first of the water signs. Excuse me, taking a sip of water. I didn't even realize as we talk about the water sign, maybe it made me thirsty realizing I was going to say that. Anyway, um, it's the very first of the water signs, so it can be a little bit sort of uh, Cancer can be a little bit, I almost want to say emotionally immature, but it's not really that. It sort of can be a bit needy, the lower expressions, um, and lack boundaries, second guess. I could see second guessing ourselves with Mars retrograde in Cancer. Um, when it comes to asserting needs or defending boundaries, that's something that could go a little bit wrong with Mars retrograde in Cancer. Vibes sort of turned a little bit differently. I think that the Cancer sort of protective instincts can kind of like amplify fears of rejection or fears of failure. And so that's where that heightened sensitivity is coming from. So just don't let that fear take over. I did a video a week or so ago about sort of just do it versus overthinking, you know, and the importance of not letting that fear take over, and that being sort of part of that Mars opposed Pluto energy that was coming in. And I think that that's still here too. This Mars retrograde can give us that pause that we don't really need. We need to just do it. But Mars retrograde in Cancer makes you want to pause and go, but wait, what are people going to think? And am I going to feel judged? Am I going to feel rejected? Um, you know, will I fail? Um, and we want to push through that feeling in a way and move more towards, I think of it as being sort of this Pluto in Aquarius here. It sort of relates to those energies that are moving us more towards the future and these exciting new impulses and things that we want to move toward. So don't let the fear take over and sort of hold you back from embracing these new things that you really want to do and these new things you're stepping into. Okay, great. cricket. Don't overreact to criticism. Um, Mars retrograde in Cancer can be a little bit sensitive, and I also think it can be a bit reactive, and it's important to remember that these energies are going on for everyone around us as well, not just for us. So if other people are acting out, you have the benefit of astrology sort of to help you remember, oh, this is like a thing that's going on right now. This is more about them than me. Don't let it get under your skin. Um, Sometimes you may receive constructive criticism during a Mars retrograde in Cancer. If something feels true that someone brings to you for you to look at, overreacting to that would be completely rejecting it. Not overreacting would be kind of taking that constructive criticism a little bit, being sort of mature enough to not take it too personally, but instead really hear and learn and grow from what they're saying. Okay, we have 2 to go, and I do really like the last one. Not that I don't mind number 10 either. I did whittle this down, but it still feels kind of long. Oh yeah, this one is really important. It would not have been right. Wait, that's not spelled right. Intuition? Yeah. Okay. Don't sleep on your intuition. It would not have been right for me to talk about this without talking about intuition. Your intuition is a little bit heightened during this time between January 6th and February 23rd, so don't forget to honor that and listen to that. Being led by intuition means, for me, one of the things it really means for me, one of the most important things it means for me is listening to what feels good and listening to what feels bad. Honoring those feelings and trusting them, even if it seems maybe a little bit silly, or maybe even I'll choose that over my logic in some ways. It's always good to pay attention to logic too, but it's nice to honor our intuition. It's nice to really honor yourself. Again, building up this cool relationship with yourself during this time is a real potential with Mars retrograde in Cancer. So if you feel like doing something, that's intuition. And listening to it is following your intuition. And then notice what came from that. You know, if you really feel like doing something and you're able to move on that, and logic isn't telling you that's a terrible idea for some really important reason, we do need to listen to that, then do it. But I don't know, if it's something silly, like say I had plans to go to dinner with someone and we were supposed to go to this one place, but then I just really have this feeling that I'd like to go somewhere else. Logically, that doesn't make sense, but part of me just really feels that way. Honoring that and listening to it and going there and then seeing what unfolds. Silly example, super mundane example, but this is live astrology and I'm doing the best I can. Thinking on the spot. Okay, and last but not least, guys, if you enjoyed this video, can you please give it a like, and it would mean a lot to me, and thank you so much for being here and for watching. Check out my channel. There are horoscopes for January up there right now that really have a lot of detailed information. And I do these every single day, so please feel free to check that out too. Okay, don't assume others know how you feel. Don't assume others know how you feel during Mars retrograde in Cancer. I think that there are sort of big feelings all around right now for us and for everyone else. So don't assume that those things are understood without being spoken. Communication is important, but miscommunication can be a little bit more likely during Mars retrograde in Cancer. So it's a great time to practice clear communication, open communication, going over things, not expecting people to read between the lines, And I think this is especially true in relationships that were already complex or that are especially close, like family members. So